All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining today. I'm Mike Dishowitz. I'm the Associate Director of the Penn Center for Innovation Ventures Group at the University of Pennsylvania. Our goal is to build startup companies around interesting technology that's being developed at the university. We like to host these pitch events every couple months, and we're looking forward to showing you a couple of our companies today. For the format, each company is going to have about 10 minutes to give a presentation, and then there'll be some Q&A afterwards. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box, or you can direct message me and I'll ask them. Let's see, we're going to be, as I said before, we're going to be recording the presentations so that you can have a copy of them and share them with any colleagues. We look forward to your feedback. Yeah, and I guess with that, I'd like to introduce Krithika Parmeswaran. She is CEO of Vital Start Health.
Thanks so much, Mike. And hello, everyone. It's great to be here. Let me get started. We've all heard of the 4 vital signs: pulse, respiratory rate, body temperature, and body pressure. Today, I'm going to be unveiling the 5th, the vital sign for well-being by Vital Start. Our initial focus is on maternal mental health, an area that's really close to my heart. I have been through postpartum depression myself and have come face to face with the discrepancies in the healthcare system. Hi, everyone. I'm Krithika Parmeswaran, a Wharton alum with deep expertise across technology and business. And I'm the founder and CEO of Vital Start Health. I'm joined in this endeavor by Dr. John Cho, who's an associate professor at Penn Medicine and a neonatal quality officer at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. We are a University of Pennsylvania Penn Center for Innovation company, also part of the Microsoft for Startups program. And we recently received our pre-seed funding from the University Science Center here in Philadelphia, as well as through our friends and family and angel round. Perinatal mood and anxiety disorders is the #1 complication in pregnancy and postpartum. This is an enormous issue, an $18 billion preventable problem in the US, and an enormous opportunity globally. We have developed the first maternal mental health platform using virtual reality for personalized, clinically guided, and equitable care using the Vital Start Wellbeing Profile, a unique algorithm that we have, as well as being a one-stop shop, multilingual platform with English and Spanish content. A key competitive advantage that we have is our unique relationship with the premier NICU. And we also have, deep passion for the space and a health equity pledge where we will be giving back 5% of our online sales to provide services for mothers who are underrepresented and underdeserved and who need these services. We have an audacious goal of impacting 1 million mothers in the next decade. The American Psychological Association has clearly recommended VR for mental health, including PTSD, OCD, phobias, stress and anxiety. And all of these are part of perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, which is what we're focused on. We've gone ahead and done a successful pilot and licensing with a leading NICU. And what we learned from that experience is that parents found VR and the immersive experience to be visceral and bringing them back all the trauma and the issues that they went through in the NICU experience. And they also felt that the VR was helping them feel less stressful. We hope to continue our clinical validation, even as we grow our platform and launch with the initial coaching services. We've also verified reimbursement codes, such as the health behavioral assessment codes and the psychotherapy codes. They aren't specific VR codes right now, but VR can be used as a modifier for psychotherapy. So with that, I'd like to unveil the Courage platform, which uses low-cost VR as well as premium options as needed. and has three prongs. The content prong, which is our, a pivotal part where we delight our customers. The virtual care platform that is driven by analytics and provides actionable insights for practitioners to provide personalized care for effective treatment for their patients. And a practitioner network of coaches and psychologists. So imagine a high-risk pregnant mother, maybe who has gestational diabetes or hypertension, who has been told that she will probably have to have her infant in the NICU. This is a very stressful experience. And just having a NICU tour, which is what is done typically, is not helping parents with stress or uncertainty. Here's what we will provide with courage. A NICU who would be our customer would be able to provide a NICU tour with psychoeducation inbuilt and a practitioner in the loop assisting them and hand-holding the patient through this journey, providing that competitive advantage and wowing their customers with these features. So with the Courage platform, we are focused on using deep analytics. We have the Vital Start Wellbeing Profile, as well as AI on our roadmap that will help us pinpoint and provide very customized care for a patient. Currently, according to Mathematica, it costs $19,000 per mother for PMATS treatment and can take over 5 years. We want to disrupt that completely using our platform, wow, and delight our customers with very unique NICU tours, birthing tours, other content, mental health, as well as the maternity content on our platform. And also with our very meticulous coaching program that we have formulated, the Vital Start coaching program, as well as the VR exposure therapy. There are many ways, to provide mental health services. We have combined the best practices with experiential practice to provide a treatment approach that can have better outcomes at lower costs. We've initially embarked on a B2C route just to get more deeper insights on our clients, as well as to understand what works, what does not work, and use that data and credibility to go after the B2B space. And that would include behavioral health providers, payers, pharmaceuticals, as well as employers. We have different tiers of service. For the B2C, we have a self-guided service, a coach-guided service. So when a patient has risk factors, but is not at a diagnostic threshold, then it's coach-guided. And if they cross the diagnostic threshold, then it is the therapy. And then for providers, we have a basic tier, which is simply content licensed from us. We have an advanced tier, which is content plus our virtual care platform that they can use with their own staff, and a premium tier where the staff comes also from Vital Start, like a managed service. We have also built great partnerships along the way with Microsoft for startups, Persistent, a software development provider, as well as market partnerships, channel partnerships with Reach, Happy Mama remote patient monitoring platform, and patient advocacy groups. We're currently evaluating group therapy as well as loss and grief, which are tough problems in the maternity space, going after the tough issues that there are not many treatment approaches out there, and also furthering our clinical validation in the NICU. For instance, group VR is something truly innovative. There's no company doing that right now. And we will be doing all these innovative things with the only single goal of driving better outcomes for our patients and being there with them along this incredible journey. As we go after $41 million by 2026, we have a lot to do. Initially we're starting with B2C, providers, employers, and retail, and then of course the payer and pharmaceuticals. And this can change, based on how we see the traction going. We've done a lot. We've raised our pre-seed round, 175K. We have onboarded a couple of coaches, our coaching program. We have evaluated initial feasibility, done licensing with a premier NICU here in Philadelphia. And we're now ready to go after our seed round, a raise of $2 million, which will be used particularly where we'll be going after driving traction and conversion in our B2C space, and then completing our validation, targeting the NICU initially, because that's a really key area that needs particular help and attention and can be a competitive edge. So we want to go after that initially and grow our team significantly. We are a unique scalable platform. We have an algorithm that helps us build very personalized content, and we've seen how that works so well in our feasibility study as well. We continue to grow that as well as the content. We have a phenomenal team and an enormous potential here. As they say, this is a field and space that is inevitable. Mental health is something that is seen in enormous need. We've just seen that in the State of Union address as well. There's a huge emphasis on this, not just for maternal health, but for all the different areas. And we play, really well in the space with a virtual care approach, as well as a unique mental health approach. I hope you'll join us and help us be the vital sign for maternal well-being. Happy to provide demos and answer further questions. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Karthika. So a couple questions. Why are you doing this with VR instead of two-dimensional screens, like computer or TV, which presumably are more accessible?
That's such a great question, Michael. So we actually started that way. We did a focus group at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where the family partners actually told us that they found VR to be, even low-cost VR, to be much more immersive than just seeing a YouTube video on all these things. And we did that first, just to make sure that there are legs to go after this. And then our discovery study, our initial feasibility study as well, backed that up, and we could see the PTSD levels coming down for the patients.
Okay. Another question, who creates the content for the VR?
Yeah, another great thing. So right now we have that partnership with the leading NICU. We've done licensing as well with them. We've created some content and we continue to create new content. We just did some filming like a week or so ago. Content is on top of mind for us. And it's not just about us building the content. We are open to licensing content from other partners, whether it's the baby centers of the world or other institutions in the VR space also, because it's very clear to me, it's important to have diverse, multilingual content that'll help drive better outcomes. Instead of trying to build all of that on our own, we are really open to partnerships as well. And that's how we're approaching this.
Okay, great. And we have time for one more question. Pardon my dog in the back, the mailman is here. What validation will you need before payers will pay for these services?
Okay, that's also a great question. So right now, where we are is we've begun our coaching services, but we haven't done the VR exposure therapy completely. And that is something we're doing with Drexel and, hopefully with the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia very soon. That is something I think that's going to be really important to go after the payer space. And that's why I'm not focusing initially on the payer space, looking first to gather enough information and have that tangible evidence to take to the payers. Now, having said that, I have to say there is, a mountain of evidence right from the VA as well as in literature that show that VR is working really well in all these fields. So this is a little bit of a, catch-22 here, but we want to do this right. So we are going after clear clinical validation, and then we're going to approach the payers.
Great. Thanks, Karthika. Appreciate the time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Next up, we have David Yance, CEO of Cogware. David, you're on mute.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
All right, good. Well, thank you for the time this afternoon to share the Cogware story with you. A few stats just to kick off the discussion today that are pretty significant and interesting. So worldwide, 264 million people suffer from anxiety disorders, and this creates a tremendous societal burden of over $1 trillion. And this was prior to the pandemic. Recently, brain-computer interfaces were identified as one of the 14 radical technology moonshots with the potential to disrupt society by 2020 with a total value of 6.4 trillion. And coupled to that, 89% of wearables that are currently on the market are still wrist-based. What I'm going to talk about today is how we're using our brain-computer interface wearable to provide actionable data to clinicians and to create precision medicine for patients, specifically to start with behavioral health patients. If you or a loved one have suffered from behavioral health, you may find that you start your process through the medical system with your primary care physician. Now, because behavioral health symptoms often show up as physical symptoms, up to 35 to 50% of patients are missed during initial screens. If you're one of the lucky ones who goes on to the next step in the process and you start therapy or you're seeing a clinical psychologist, you're going to find a group within medicine that is at maximum capacity. And this was prior to the pandemic. And now with the pandemic in place, regularly we see stories about months wait to see these therapists and clinical psychologists. Further, the specialists in the field, the psychiatrists, lots of what they do, despite best practice today, is still very much a trial and error process. And this is especially true with pharmaceuticals. Because each pharmaceutical works differently with each person, there are many situations where people who have been on drugs for years without having an effect. And finally, the payers do not have a physiologic quality of care metric to guide care to say what's really working best and what should be that path through the care pathway. Because you can't improve something that you can't well measure, what if we had a way, very similar to our last company, to have a vital sign for behavioral health? So very similar to how we use temperature to help treat the flu, what if we could do the same for behavioral health? And that's precisely what we're bringing to market. We're bringing to market the first vital sign for behavioral health. And we're doing this by asking the brain, not the person, to identify, measure, and trend anxiety. Today, there's a huge goal and approach to try to do this, but it's based upon other wearables that are wrist-based and other remote devices. They're trying to extrapolate physical symptoms to show cognitive symptoms. What we're going to do is directly measure the brain through a wearable that's a soft goods wearable, looks like a standard athletic headband, yet can provide clinical grade brain measurements, or EEGs. And what our data has shown to date in our research, that we have a tremendous increase in accuracy on the ability to not only pinpoint cognitive information, but specifically measure anxiety. When we apply this to the care pathway, what we've shown in research studies with nearly 1,000 participants is that at the same specificity of surveys that are used today to screen anxiety, which means we have no increase in false positives, we double the sensitivity. So what that means is that we capture the vast majority of people who would be missed during initial screens. When used as a remote monitor, this provides a way for the therapist and clinical psychologist to know the severity of a person who's coming into therapy, and also gives them a way to monitor them remotely between sessions so they know if somebody has taken a relapse or somewhat has taken a turn for the worse. For medical professionals who are prescribing drugs, a psychiatrist, for instance, EEG or brainwaves have been shown to predict responder to certain drugs. And also we should be able to see an earlier effect on drugs instead of taking the 6 week to 8 week time it takes to see a drug's impact. And finally, the payers now have a physiologic quality metric to help them optimize care. We have two key technologies that allow us to do this. The first are our nanotechnology derived EEG sensors. What this allows us to do is create a clinical grade EEG signal that matches the best gold standard signals available today in clinic, yet do that with 62% better rejection of motion-based noise. So essentially, we can get brainwave measurements with clinical grade anywhere, anytime for as long as you need. And we show that we have a tremendous increase in accuracy of measuring cognitive features. Second are our algorithms, and that's very much coupled to that. With the algorithms that we have in place today, we are the only company out there that can target the neurocircuits in the brain that are implicated in anxiety and depression. So we stand apart from the other companies that have tried this to date. We have three main components of our system, of our architecture, our platform. The first is our wearable headband. The user would put it on their head. Very simply, they're up and running within seconds, and takes a 5-minute anxiety measurement. They would interact with the device through our wearable through a mobile application. This streams data from the device and also configures the device. Data is sent up to a HIPAA-compliant data platform. This is a secure environment where algorithms process on the data and they send the information back to the patient. And also, we have the ability to enable the provider and the caregiver to also see the results. We have a 3-step pathway to market. First is we're going after FDA clearance through a 510(k) pathway. To start, we're doing this for 2 reasons. One is for anxiety and behavioral health, and also other areas in medicine. This allows us to be used in clinic. It also positions us well for existing reimbursement. Second, it differentiates us from the consumer devices on the market that can't come close to where we are in terms of the brain measurements. Second, we know that because it's a different approach for behavioral health, we're going to have to do market development. And in fact, we would expect to do that in a variety of different approaches that we would take. We're going to do this through a clinical study, really to show that we have clinical and healthcare economic outcomes. And we're also going to engage our advisory board to work with other key opinion leaders in societies. And third, we're going to target the larger behavioral health practices that have a bolus of therapists and clinical psychologists with them to start our sales ramp into the market. We're going to price this at $400 for the first 5 months. That includes the hardware and access to our data platform, and then $40 per month after that first 5 months. 5 months was picked because that's the average initial therapy window that patients go through. And what's important is with this pricing, we fall under existing chronic care codes for remote monitoring because we are a physiologic monitor. And those codes are in place for CMS and commercial insurers. And within the cash pay environment, which is still a very large portion of the behavioral health space, we fall within 1.5 to 2 therapy sessions. And that's been deemed reasonable by the customers we've spoken to date. For our market approach, I mentioned we're going to start with anxiety. And the reason we're doing that, it's just a tremendously huge market with 264 million people worldwide. There are 15 million adults seeking treatment. So that's a subset of the people that actually have anxiety. So with the revenue numbers I just showed you, or the pricing numbers I just showed you, that's equivalent to a $6 billion attainable market. At the same time, we want to be opportunistic. We truly are going to have a platform that can be used just in a whole host of areas. And by stripping out the algorithms and actually making it a much simpler product and just having raw EEG, we're going to immediately be opportunistic and sell into the academic and the research space, in the brain-computer interface space. This today is a $560 million market, and we have the ability to make money very early on. And after that, we have a platform that's going to be enabled for rapid prototyping in many different areas, things from Alzheimer's disease to human performance to general business and marketing. We're architecting the system to the highest level of requirements to allow us to do that. To date, we showed proof of principle in all aspects of our system, and we're making headway in our wearable design from a hardware perspective. 12 to 18 months from full funding, we will be in a position where we're going to be ready to launch and go after the 510(k) clearance and also start the clinical study. That's the point where we're going to start sales into the research market. And we also are going to be in a good position to do rapid prototyping for partnerships in other spaces as well. With this approach, the financials are very lucrative. We achieve, with a gross margin of 75%, we achieve profitability within 3 years and cash flow break even shortly thereafter. And we do this by penetrating a very small single-digit percentage of the markets that we're talking about. To date, we've raised $350,000 in non-dilutive capital. We're raising $2 million now, and we would love to have other people join the folks that are already in diligence with us. And we plan to have to raise 2 other rounds. One is when we're ready to go for 510(k), and that's really to scale up manufacturing and start initial sales with an inside sales force. And then we expect at the completion of the clinical study, we're going to scale up our sales organization to be able to launch the anxiety vital sign. We have multiple exit scenarios. So first are the digital care access platforms such as Headspace and Neuroflow that are already providing behavioral healthcare. We'd be a great addition to that platform by having a vital sign that can be used to better provide care and more precise care. We have licensing scenarios for these other markets that are not our core. And in fact, we have the first deal that's already signed with a company named Reason. They have a next generation athletic headband, protective headband for sports like rugby and soccer. We're going to create the first smart headband that's not only going to be able to identify traumatic brain injury, but also focus on the human performance aspect as well. What this does for us is gives us a commercial partner very early on, Plus, we have access to their headband, which is accelerating our product development. And finally, from a big technology standpoint, the Facebooks and the Googles of the world, they're also showing interest in these type of products, these type of wearables that provide a different level of information than what can be gotten from today's devices. We have a very solid team. One of our co-founders, Michael Platt, he's a neuroscience pioneer with a triple appointment at Penn, and he's the director and founder of the Wharton Neuroscience Initiative. Arjun Ramakrishnan has held appointments at a variety of universities and centers in the US and is currently on the faculty of the Indian Institute of Technology. Myself, I'm a 20+ year veteran of the medical device industry and have helped deliver over 50 products to market. Our advisory team is also very strong. We have Greg Kohler, who's an IP attorney, who's helping us deliver and create a tiered IP strategy that's also very financially efficient. And we have several advisors who are either practitioners within the behavioral health space or former executives in the space and know the market extremely well. So to close, in summary, I believe we have a very unique opportunity that you do not see very often in the medical device space. We have a tremendously large market with a huge unmet need. For an investment of $2 million, we can get to market and achieve quick profitability very quick. We've got the data that's backed by research already with 1,000 humans to date. And this shifts the standard of care versus where we are today with identifying anxiety and other behavioral health conditions. We have a strong team, and because of all the different spaces that we can get into after we hit our beachhead market, we have tremendous upside risk, certainly from an investment standpoint, and the potential to really have a very significant and large impact on society overall. So with that, I'd like to thank you for the time today, and certainly we'll be happy to entertain any questions.
Thanks, David. That was terrific. First question, what kind of internal capabilities, personnel expertise do you think you need to build out over the next 2 years?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I see is just really building out our engineering team. We have partners that we're working with on the hardware side. So I could see having 1 or 2 people there, certainly on the software side as well, from a data platform and just an algorithmic standpoint to make sure that we're doing the right things that we need to do from a medical device standpoint under a quality system. And then certainly as we get further down the road, we're manufacturing our electrodes today ourselves. These are novel electrodes. We need to build out that manufacturing process so people that have an eye to the efficiency to build tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of product versus 1 or 2.
Okay. Do patients have to wear the band for 5 minutes each on several days to capture the information over a longer duration to get the results, or is it more short term?
We have two approaches. So one is based upon the research that's been done to date. We have proven that we can identify an out of sample patient, so somebody who would show up at the clinic or wear it for the first time. Compared with the average database, we can tell the type of anxiety and the level that they have. We do expect, though, that once somebody wears this and say they wear it 5 minutes a day at the same time every day, we'll have the ability to get a baseline, and we'll have a lot more refinement to looking at the trends off that baseline. So what we expect, and we expect this with a lot of different areas within the looking at brainwaves and the cognitive information, that any individual variation there, once we have that baseline, we can get much, much more specific about how somebody is actually trending.
How about your IP position? Is it on the device itself, algorithms?
Both. We have IP that and actually it's even broader than that. We have IP that we have filed on the nanosensor derived technology for the electrode sensors itself. We have a PCT application that actually was just filed here recently that is not only on parts of the nanosensors, but broader use cases as well. So it covers how this would be used. It covers the platform technology that we're establishing, the architecture of that. And then we also have some IP around the algorithms that we're currently licensing from Penn. Do doctors prescribe the headband? We'll want to know, how do patients get the headband? Our initial approach is to go through the therapist or the doctors themselves. We expect this to be ultimately to be an over-the-counter Class 2 device and to be used in conjunction with a caregiver. We see that as the initial way to go, and certainly that's something that we're going to shake out as we get into the market and we test that further.
A question about the EEG measurement. How variable is it? Is it affected by hair, for example, or other aspects that could deviate from one individual to the next?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that play into fact there. So traditionally, EEG measurements have been very hard to do because of the type of sensors that are used, and they need to be placed individually by a technician. So place electrodes at the right point on the head, and they're using gels as well that are also very difficult and messy. Our approach is our sensors work very quickly. And so with the band that we're designing, it's going to be self-aligning, so there'll be no extra help that's needed. And because they're a dry sensor technology, they can get going very quickly. So from the standpoint of being able to pick up the signals, we can get that right away. Now, our sensors are limited right now to across the forehead and behind the ears, areas where the hair is not present. However, given that we have very good resolution on the frontal lobe and temporal lobe of the brain, and we can really pick up a lot of different things from just across the board. Now, with that, we also know that with everything in medicine, there is individual variation. There's individual variation in the way that the brain functions. However, there's a whole bolus of research on EEG that's been done in clinic in the past 3-4 decades. And we can leverage that really to come up and identify the areas where we can now be very helpful. And it really creates this new paradigm where, given those average responses of people, we now can get this out in the real world and trend it more easily than it's ever been able to be done before.
Okay. We have more questions. Have you thought about using this technology for applications in epilepsy? For example, monitoring seizure activity at the home, perhaps alerting family members when seizures are first taking place, and/or adding machine learning to predict seizure onset before it occurs?
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, we've been in conversations with one company that has some expertise in the algorithm side of that itself. We have not started there just because we're not as far down the road as those algorithms ourselves, but that's something that we are interested in. So depending upon the type of seizure and the starting point of the seizure, this could be very helpful for that type of product. So that's something that we're investigating. And as you likely can see, there's so many different areas within medicine that we could play. We're trying to be disciplined as we go through this, but that's an area for us that we do see it's a potential help to a lot of patients.
Okay, and one final question. Are you developing a single metric like temperature that gives you a simple indicator?
We are, with a caveat. So the way that we expect this to roll out is it will be a single metric scale, 0 to 100 or something like that. However, we can get much more refined than that. So I mentioned before that we have the ability to tell the type of anxiety, whether it's something where somebody's predisposed to anxiety or it's something that is more of a PTSD, state-based stress anxiety. So that provides a little more variation and granularity. And then certainly beyond anxiety, we believe the same techniques that we're using can also be used for instance, depression, ADHD. And then we're also looking at other markers for things like Alzheimer's disease. So by using EEG in conjunction with some other tasks that somebody may do on their mobile phone, we have the ability to not only say there's a single measure, but then discriminate between these various type of behavioral health and various type of brain ailments that exist.
Terrific. Thanks, David. Thanks for your time today.
Great. Thank you.
And I also want to thank the audience. Keep the questions coming there. They're fantastic, and they really add to the presentation. And just a reminder, you can send it to everyone in the chat below, or you can direct message me, and I'll get it. All right. Up next, I'd like to introduce Eric Corkell, CEO of Neuralert. And while he gets prepared, I want to let everyone know that we have a couple opportunities later this month to hear from other companies in our portfolio. Innovation at Penn will be hosting 2 virtual pitch sessions March 16th and 17th in partnership with the Penn Wharton Club of Austin. Startups will be they'll include companies from Pennovation Center and PCI Ventures portfolio. My colleague Jamie will share a link in the chat with more information. All right, thank you, Eric.
We all ready to go?
Yep, we're good. We see you, we hear you.
Perfect. All right. Well, good afternoon. Neuralert is going to be the world's first non-invasive wearable stroke detection and alerting system that will save millions of people. Hi, my name is Eric Corkell. I'm CEO of Neuralert. I've been a veteran of the digital health industry for 40 years. I've been a serial startup guy for 25. I've been part of 5 prior exits totaling $500 million. And I have never been as excited nor as committed about any company that I am like Neuralert. And let me tell you why. 1 in 4 people will have a stroke. So you probably have a family member, a friend, a coworker that has suffered through a stroke. So you understand. It's the #1 cause of severe disability, the #3 cause of death. But stroke is treatable if it is detected in time, and that is our mission, to have a means to continuously detect stroke and automate the alerts. Let me show you how. It starts with non-invasive, lightweight wristbands that are placed on the wrist, and they're monitoring arm movement, specifically asymmetry in arm movement, which, like face drooping or speech slurring, is a classic indication of a stroke. Now, these bands, they transmit their telemetry to a patented algorithm that's constantly evaluating it, looking for signs of stroke. But what it also does, the algorithm mathematically models out all of those other causes of asymmetry: hand dominance, talking on a cell phone, eating, an IV line in the hospital. But when the algorithm does detect a stroke, then the system immediately generates an alert. In the hospital setting, this alert goes to a mobile device, a nurse's cell phone or tablet. In the home environment, it alerts the wearer with a haptic signal, and they have 2 minutes to reset the device before it automatically calls emergency services. To reset the device, all that person needs to be able to do is to raise their hand above their head. So how do we know Neuralert works? Well, this technology was developed at the University of Pennsylvania. By the way, we have an exclusive license signed with them, and it's been tested over the last 3 years on over 400 patients, non-ambulatory patients, patients in their beds, patients right after surgery. We have peer-reviewed data that proves Neuralert can detect a stroke in as little as 15 minutes, 95% of strokes within 1 hour, and that's with a single false alarm per patient per day. Now, you compare that to what happens in hospitals today, where stroke detection is a manual process, and the majority of strokes are not detected for 5 hours. And it's because of this improvement that the FDA designated Neuralert as a breakthrough technology device last July. Now, we're going to start marketing the product in hospitals. Why hospitals? Believe it or not, 17% of all strokes that happen to patients that are already in the hospital for other clinical reasons. But not just any hospitals. Hospitals that the Joint Commission has designated as primary stroke care centers, because these are the organizations that are spending millions of dollars on the technology and on the staff to be able to deal and address with strokes. They also happen to be the same organizations that are performing the greatest number of high stroke risk cardiovascular procedures. Some of these procedures have a stroke incident rate of 10%. So that population, those hospitals, is going to be the fastest way for us to demonstrate the clinical and scientific efficacy of Neuralert as a stroke detection mechanism. Now, once we do have a dozen or so of these clients using the product, then we expand. We're going to expand across the acute care spectrum to protect the 15 million people that are admitted every year with an elevated risk of stroke, people with a history of stroke, of AFib, congestive heart failure, diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure, the elderly. We're going to expand into long-term care facilities, nursing homes, rehab hospitals to protect our frail and elderly. And we're going to expand into consumer health because we designed the Neuralert band to be compatible with existing health wearables such as Apple Watch and Google Fitbit. Now, more specifically, let's talk about the revenue model. For the acute care environment, it's a $5,000 annual SaaS fee. And think of it as a bed fee because you can have multiple people use this license during the course of the year. So the $5,000 is spread out over 40, 50, 60 patients during the course of the year. In the hospital, the Neuralert bands, they're disposable with a 5-day battery life, and they're designed to cost about $35 a pair. So the total cost for a hospital to protect a patient from a stroke that isn't detected or treated in time is $135. That is a fraction of what the actual hospital cost is. In a paper that was presented 2 weeks ago at the International Stroke Conference, data from Penn gathered over the last 5 years shows that their direct cost for one of these strokes is $99,000. Indirect cost, $56,000, with an 18-day increase in length of stay, all of which is not reimbursable. Now, for the long-term care, it's not a disposable device, it's a rechargeable device, and the revenue model bundles the cost of the device with an annual subscription fee. Now, when it comes to consumer health, it's a VAR licensing model. We're going to license the technology to the Apples, the Googles, the Amazons, the Life Alerts, the ADTs, the Connect Americas, so that they can build a compatible secondary wristband to their primary product, expand their reach, and have immediate penetration into the consumer marketplace. There's only one competitor trying to use asymmetry data as a means of stroke detection. By the way, there are several, 4 or 5, that are using headset-based invasive devices not meant to be a continuous monitor. Alva, though, is trying to do what we're doing. The biggest difference, they don't have our patented algorithm. They're trying to do this through straight machine learning and artificial intelligence, and they require something called baselining. What this means is you have to put their bands on and wait days, weeks, or even months to create what they call a patient-specific limb signature, a baseline, before their product works. Neuralert, we know that in 15 minutes, we can begin to detect stroke. So who's the team behind this phenomenal technology? As I said, I'm a serial startup person with multiple exits to my background. Dr. Messe, neurologist, University of Penn. He heads Penn's Center for Neurocardiac Protection, the unit that deals specifically with in-hospital strokes. He also chairs multiple committees on the American Hospital and American Stroke Association. Dr. James Weimer, PhD, biomedical engineering, signal processing. He's the author of our patented algorithm. Our CTO, Ded Anson, proven developer of FDA-approved mobile and wearable applications. So we're in the process of raising a $1.5 million seed round. About a third of it has been raised. We're using a convertible note, competitive terms, 6% interest, 20% discount, 24-month term, and a $5 million cap. Now, the purpose of these funds is to achieve 2 major milestones. Number 1, MVP. The software for Neuralert has all been developed and tested. The algorithm is working perfectly. The last thing that needs to be developed are these purpose-built wristbands, and they are being delivered to us next month. So by the end of March, we will have achieved the MVP status. So the majority of this money, this is our FDA path. As I said, we've already been designated a breakthrough. We had our pre-sub meeting with the FDA 2 weeks ago and went very, very well. We will begin our clinical study necessary for application to the FDA as a Class 2 de novo device this year, completed towards the end of the year, early next year. So by the middle of 2023, we will have achieved FDA clearance. Now, because, oh, by the way, we'll be raising a Series A round after we apply to the FDA to fund commercialization, to manufacture bands at scale, and also to hire the necessary people to go after that first market segment. Now, because of limited competition, because of the tremendous market opportunity, we think we'll have multiple opportunities for a strategic exit, either to sales in the medical device community like Medtronic, Hill-Rom, Stryker, or in the consumer health environment like the Apples, Googles, Amazons, Life Alerts. There are 1.2 billion people living today that are going to have a stroke, and we can help them if we detect that stroke faster. So I'm asking you, join us in our mission to end the devastation that is caused by a stroke not detected in time. We're looking at a $1.5 million raise to get us through FDA clearance. We have proven and patented technology, and we have a clear path to a near-term strategic exit. So I hope you can join us in our mission. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Your passion for this is palpable, and it certainly rubs off on everyone. Thanks for your time on this. To get started, can you share a little bit more detail on how you plan to expand into long-term care and the consumer health markets?
Yeah, I mean, so long-term care is it's a pretty straight reach. You've got I think something like 1.75 million people in nursing homes right now that would be great candidates for this device. The method for getting into that is actually through the medical directors that oversee the various long-term care sites. Consumer health, we aren't anticipating of being a direct-to-consumer model. We'd basically like to license the technology to companies that are already in that business. And companies, as I said, like Life-Alert and Connect America and ADT, they've got 5.5 million subscribers where Neuralert is a direct overlay value proposition to their existing I've fallen down and can't get up model. And it would also utilize their on-call medical help desk representatives.
What setting was the study with the 95% detection rate conducted in? If it was not in a non-ambulatory inpatient setting, what is the detection rate in these patients?
Yeah, so we've done 2 case control prospective studies at the University of Penn since 2019. Again, 400 patients, all non-ambulatory, meaning they were in beds. Many of them had just come out of surgery, so there were still some residual, perhaps sedatives. And the data, which is amazing, demonstrates that there is no detection difference between nighttime, daytime, meaning sleep or awake. There's no difference in detection whether you're right-handed or left-handed, and no difference in detection whether the stroke was on your dominant or non-dominant side. So great data that is showing that the algorithm is working.
Is it possible to use existing hardware such as Fitbit or Apple Watch to detect stroke? And if so, how come you chose to develop your own device?
Yeah, so from the hospital setting, we looked at Apple's watches, Google's Fitbits, Samsung Galaxy watches. The problem is that we're sampling the data so quickly, and we're also pushing it up through a Wi-Fi signal. And quite frankly, we would be burning through the battery life of those devices very, very quickly. So we decided to do a purpose-built device, make it disposable, give it a 5-day battery life, so we are minimizing the overhead that the nursing staff would have to worry about. Now, when it comes to long-term care and a rechargeable, then yeah, I mean, the idea is to be able to work with these companies like Apple's, Google's, Amazon's to make compatible products to their existing product line.
Great. Okay, well, we have one more question. How does the device work when a patient is sleeping and there's hardly any arm movement?
Believe it or not, if you've ever seen a sleep study, patients are actually constantly moving while they're sleeping, and the system is sensitive enough to pick up these micro movements during sleep. And again, as mentioned, these were all non-ambulatory patients, and there was no data difference or sensitivity difference between nighttime hours and daytime hours. So we're able to identify these movements while the patient is asleep.
All right. Thanks, Eric. That is all the questions that we have for you. Yeah, again, appreciate your time. And also, thank the audience as well for the very good questions.
Well, thank you all, and look forward to working with you.
All right. Up next, I'd like to introduce Jerriann Thatcher, CEO of FlowBio.
Afternoon, everybody. Fantastic. All right. All right, I'm finally working here. Thanks very much for the opportunity this afternoon. I'm thrilled to introduce you to FlowBio. And what I'd like you to do today as we start our conversation, I want you to think about how would you feel if you experience a serious medical condition, an emergency, right, where you have a high risk of bleeding to death, and your fate depended on emergency and trauma physicians guessing on what to do next and hoping for the best. Well, I'm Jerriann Thatcher, CEO of FlowBio, and our mission is to remove that guesswork by developing a point-of-care diagnostic platform that can uncover those specific blood clotting abnormalities. And we want to improve early risk assessment. We want to make sure we can personalize treatment, monitor patients, and prevent those costly complications and death. And what we know is that uncontrolled bleeding is the #1 cause of preventable death. And there is a compelling clinical and economic need for new, sensitive, and specific approaches to hemostasis management. And we are uniquely suited with our innovation to address this clinical need by providing actionable results. And we do have a patent pending. We have validated our system, both scientifically, technically, and clinically. And we also have well vetted it with customers with over 90 clinicians. And we are also gaining significant traction with clinical collaborations as well as partnership opportunities, really positioning us as a compelling investment opportunity. And it's truly unacceptable that clinicians lack the crucial information they need today for time-sensitive decision-making. And as a result, they're facing challenges in diagnosing and managing millions of injured, elderly patients, those that have medical conditions, as well as are on medications that increase their risk for bleeding. And in these situations, there is an acute need for a test that uncovers the specific clotting abnormality so clinicians know what to do next, especially as they're considering surgery, the safe use of blood thinners, as well as the appropriate use of costly blood products and treatments. And the problem is that current tests present an incomplete picture. They leave clinicians to piece together bits of information at different time points, with tests often taking 45 minutes to even hours. And these tests cannot directly evaluate the blood physiology, and none of them are able to address the growing safety concerns that exist in emergency care to detect and assess newer blood thinners such as Eliquis, Xarelto, and Pradaxa. And this really leaves clinicians in a tough position, guesstimating and delaying critically needed treatment for these emergency patients. And so to address this immediate clinical need, we're taking a cutting edge approach, developing the only test that simulates the biological microenvironment of blood clot formation as it occurs in the body. And in doing so, we're directly and we're comprehensively measuring clotting status in one test. And at the core of our disposable cartridge is this patent pending injection mold device that you see here, which is designed to incorporate blood vessel-like geometry, physiological flow, as well as clot formation. And we can do so in real time using very low volumes of whole blood. And so our vision is to introduce a near-patient system that's easily deployable in hospitals in a variety of settings, where a nurse can simply transfer a very small amount of whole blood to the disposable cartridge, and the test is run on a small tabletop instrument, and we have software that manages the functionality as well as imaging and analysis of the actual clot being formed. And we do provide timely and actionable results that is critical in emergency and critical care settings. So consider a world with FlowBio in our physio system, where we are filling that information gap, and we're doing so within that 10 to 20 minute triage window that is so critical. And really the benefit is that we can help clinicians make rapid and personalized decisions for their patients and help them monitor them over time. Hospitals can reduce their utilization and cost, and preventable complications, morbidity, and even deaths can be avoided. And it's really this small addition to the existing workflow that can make a real difference when you consider the burden for hospitals and managing these complex patients. Bleeding complications are costly. They impact ICU and length of stays. They impact transfusion rates, as well as having effect well after patient discharge in terms of higher rates of readmissions, as well as long-term disability. And also with the recent launch of DOAC reversal agents, there's a growing scrutiny on these medications, their appropriate use, access, and there's a heightened demand for a test specific to these agents to really drive cost-effective and evidence-based decisions. And now our platform technology is very adaptable, very versatile. It has broad clinical utility as a result, as you can see reflected in our R&D collaborations. Our lead product for DOACs is where we're currently focusing, where there is no existing test, and we have growing stakeholder demand. In addition, this is really just the beginning, as we intend to expand into other applications, including trauma, antiplatelet medication monitoring, and platelet function testing. And we're also taking advantage of emerging drug and companion diagnostic development collaborations that we are currently faced with. And it's this ability to develop a suite of tests that really drive multiple annuity streams via a razor blade model. And it really allows us to capitalize on the large addressable $13 billion US market, as well as an opportunity to expand globally. And our first test with DOACs really targets a very specific subset of patients suspected of or taking DOACs in the emergency critical care settings, with our initial pricing really based on our reimbursement analysis to date, as well as multiple tests per patient, reflecting clinicians' desire to monitor their patients over time. And we are uniquely positioned to win as we develop and enter the market. Other tests, such as clotting time tests like the PTINRs or viscoelastic tests like TEG, or even lab specialty tests, they really fail to replicate the physiology of the body. Thus, they're not directly measuring the functional aspects of blood clotting, and they don't provide that complete picture in real time in one test, nor do they reliably detect or quantify direct oral anticoagulants. We do have a well-established path to market. We've spoken to regulatory experts, and we are submitting our breakthrough medical device designation. We're also pursuing right now our clinical design and validation plan, and we do expect a de novo FDA filing. And as with other coagulation tests, we will capitalize on existing reimbursement pathways covered primarily under a bundled hospital payment, but we're also going to be prepared to leverage coagulation CPT codes that exist, as well as considering CMS's new technology add-on payment system. And because we do have an ongoing portfolio and annuity streams, this will be an important part of our strategy while exploring value-based pricing, as well as benefiting from strong disposable margins. And we do anticipate a direct sales model where we'll target a core group of hospitals really focused on blood product stewardship, as well as the safe patient use of DOACs within their hospital system. And our development path to FDA is well planned out. To date, we've raised just over $1 million, and we've achieved several significant milestones, including developing a research use only system. We have technically and clinically validated the feasibility of our approach with a patent pending and a regulatory strategy outlined. We do anticipate that we need to raise $22 million to get to FDA clearance, with an exit strategy likely as we continue with our ongoing clinical validation, as well as our collaboration opportunities and get closer to FDA approval. And I think it's also important to note that we've recently received an intent to fund from NIH for a 1.6 million plus phase 2 grant, and we're currently raising an additional 2.5 million to advance clinical validation with our RUO system to engage FDA and to really advance to the next stage of product development. And we are pursuing multiple avenues for collaboration, partnerships, and acquisition. And there are two strategic approaches. One really looking at FlowBio as a point of care diagnostic platform, but we're also looking at strategies relative to companion diagnostics as well as medication monitoring. And we do think we're well situated given the precedent for acquisition in the diagnostic space, particularly pre-FDA approval, as companies look to bring new innovations into market and differentiate themselves. Now, our team is well poised to advance the company. I have over 30 years of commercial and new product development experience. Our founder, Dr. Scott Diamond, is an expert in blood biology and microfluidics. We're also joined by Mark Kunkel, who's a 25-year veteran with broad experience in commercial development and operations, especially in early stage and smaller companies. And Jason Rossi is our co-inventor and our lead researcher who brings deep experience in the technology, particularly our DOAC assay. And we also have established a very strong group of advisors covering the diagnostic industry, clinical, regulatory, as well as R&D startup experience. And I'd particularly like to note Dr. Alan Wright, who is currently the VP of Medical Affairs for bioMérieux and formerly with Roche Diagnostics, as well as Nicole Sunderland, who is a clinical care nurse out of Hershey Medical Center, who really is focused on quality and implementation. And so collectively, our mission at FlowBio is to improve the diagnosis and management of bleeding risk in the emergency critical care settings. We want to have a direct impact and help clinicians have a direct impact on rapid and evidence-based decision-making so we can drive cost-effective approaches, but most importantly, improve patient outcomes. And as we raise our $2.5 million, we're looking for investment partners that believe in our mission, believe in our team, and we'd like them to join us on this journey. So I'll stop there and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Jerriann. So your development timeline it's pretty well thought out, capital efficient over the next couple of years. Take the company 10 years ahead, 12 years ahead. What are the really big opportunities out there that you can pivot, or not pivot this to, but after you've got that traction generating revenue, what's the big market that you want to go for, but not right now?
Yeah, so I would say that the big market that we would love to go for is trauma, right? That is a huge area of unmet need. Certainly it isn't the easiest marketplace as we talk to our clinical advisors, but I think that is one where we need to start early and really think through our plan. But, even beyond emergency care, I mean, there are so many areas. I mean, COVID has been an area that has come up. Transplant medicine has come up. I could name a million other areas where hemostasis and coagulation management is truly a challenge, where doctors need better approaches. So, we have too many choices, quite honestly, and we need to really continue to refine and prioritize as we go forward.
So this next question is actually related to your last comment. Can you talk a little bit more about your collaborations and what doors they've opened, how it's changed the strategy even, or, opportunistic versus, thinking ahead. So please talk more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are dealing with that right now. It's a barren space of riches, really. So our DOAC strategy, I think, is right on based on the market need and working with Dr. Suker, who's an international expert. But our collaborations out of Penn Presby with Dr. Niels Martin really is pivotal because it allows us to continue to get real world experience in the emergency trauma areas, right, by the end user, not just in direct oral anticoagulants, but he's helping us expand to generate trauma data, which really is a wonderful thing for us. And then to your point about expansion, our platelet function assays really, with our collaborations with a drug company, well, 2 drug companies that we're developing now, it allows us to go down platelet functioning, which is a whole different area. But what we're looking for there is strategic funding from those companies, quite honestly. So it doesn't distract from our core business, but allowing us to leverage, right, their interest and putting the business development deals in place that help it be self-funding, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thanks, Jerriann. That's all the questions that we have. I appreciate your time today.
Great. Thank you to everyone. We very much appreciate it and hope to speak to folks in the future.
Great. All right. So up next are the therapeutic companies. With the first one, Epivario. We have Tom Kim, CEO of the company.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for the introduction. Thomas Kim, President CEO of Epivario, and appreciate this time to talk a little bit about Epivario and what we're doing. Great. Is that coming through?
Yep, I see it.
Okay, great. So this is Epivario. We're developing a neuroepigenetic platform and providing revolutionary treatments for substance use disorders. Obligatory forward-looking statements. And here we are. We're a company spun out of University of Pennsylvania. Obviously, that's why we're here. Exclusively in-licensed patents from University of Pennsylvania. We have deep-seated expertise in epigenetics and neuro. And we're providing this breakthrough finding in the brain related to this epigenetic gene regulation that's highly critical to memory formation. And this was published in Nature back in 2017 and 19. And we were a finalist in the Nature Spinoff Prize back in 2020. Now, this platform has wide applicability. We'll talk a little bit more in specific about nicotine, but it's got applications across the addiction panoply and then also anxiety disorders. So addiction, as many of you may know, it's an epidemic, particularly highlighted of recent years with the pandemic. And it's really a large market starving for new therapies. In particular with nicotine, It's still prevalent globally, causes a lot of unnecessary disease and unnecessary deaths. With that, there's only 2 FDA-approved non-nicotine therapies, including Chantix. And you can see with its modicum of success, 23% abstinence rate in a year compared to 10% placebo, it still generates roughly $900 million in revenue. In addition, overall, there's a large burden to society due to addiction, not just healthcare. And it also creates a strong socioeconomic disadvantage. Despite the same level of consumption, those of lower socioeconomic status exhibit harm at a rate of 2 to 5 times greater for a number of reasons. And really what we're talking about here in terms of the memory-related cycle that causes these addiction disorders, it's a vicious cycle where you go through the drug-taking experience, and it gets entrenched in your memory circuits, and then it exacerbates over time. And what Epivario is doing is it's breaking this cycle through its epigenetic regulation of memory. And here you can see as we eliminate the strength of the memory of the drug-taking experience, we can start attenuating the unwanted behavior, which is the drug craving urges. And here you can see the illustration of the target. It's an enzyme called acetyl-CoA synthetase, and it's highly critical to histone acetylation and upregulating immediate early memory genes that cause the neuroplasticity to form these memories. And in case of these maladaptive memories like addiction, it's unwanted. And by using a small molecule inhibitor, we can inhibit this process, downregulating the acetyl-CoA and thereby downregulating neuroplasticity and helping to attenuate the unwanted behavior, the drug craving, and achieve a healthy state of mind. Now I'm going to talk to you about our promise in addiction and developing these therapies, working with leading researchers and working on translative animal models. With regard to addiction, nicotine addiction, we are collaborating with Dr. Karen Lerman, who's the head of the Cancer Research Center at University of Southern California, longtime expert in smoking cessation and other nicotine-related phase 2 studies. Paul Kenny, who's at Mount Sinai and also the director of their Drug Discovery Institute, also a co-founder of Eolus Therapeutics, and working with his translative animal model, which we'll talk about, we're translating that into a first-in-human study. And this illustration shows the self-administration model that is the gold standard for addiction. And just briefly, the animals are put in this box and learn to lever press for food pellets. And then afterwards, they are surgically catheterized to receive the drug of abuse. So now they press a lever to receive the drug of abuse along with cues of light and sound. And then we can extinguish this behavior by putting them back in the cage, no light or sound, they press a lever, no drug of abuse. And eventually that behavior wanes. And then we can elicit that response again by putting them back in the box with cues of light and sound. And you'll see the results from the nicotine study, which was run by Paul's lab. And here you can see in purple, the control, and in the red, the treated cohort. The first number of days, we allow all of them to reach stable intake of nicotine. And then we treat with either vehicle or our drug. And then by day 4, you can see day 4 of treatment, a significant reduction in nicotine intake. And that continues for the next couple of days. And then we go into the extinction process or abstinence. And you can see on day 1, this massive drug craving in the control. And here the treated animals are significantly lower. They both cohorts extinguish, get to a basal level, and then when we present the cues, you can see the control animals, you can see their drug craving by their lever press here, where this is in the treated cohort, it's significantly reduced and actually below the stable intake levels of over here. Now, this is something that we're very excited about, and we can see how this could translate into a first-in-human study. Working with Karen Lerman at USC, we're designing a first-in-human study, including a phase 1B with a patient cohort where they would smoke. They would have controlled smoking sessions while they would be treated with our drug. And this would be part of an abstinence program where the goal would be obviously to maintain abstinence and also prevent relapse in these patients. And this summarizes our success using these addiction models. Also working with Howard Becker at the Medical University of South Carolina. He runs an operant alcohol self-admin model. And then also Chris Cowan at MUSC, who's run a cocaine self-administration model. And we've been really pleased with the results across all these drugs of abuse. We've seen lower intake of the drug and also a significant reduction in drug craving responses due to cues. And just a quick overview of our pipeline. Our focus is developing this nicotine use disorder drug, but we're also collaborating with Howard Becker on a SBIR application for alcohol use disorder. And we're seeking partnerships with the government for PTSD as well on our anxiety side of things. And our team, we're fortunate to have two esteemed researchers in the epigenetic space, Shelley Berger at the University of Pennsylvania and director of the Epigenetics Institute, Philip Muse, who's an instructor at Mount Sinai and a postdoc in Eric Nestler's lab, and then Mike Dischewitz, our representative over at PCI. We're fortunate to have very experienced advisors, business advisors, including current and former biotech CEOs, for example, Joan Lau at Spearvant, and a retired executive and former president of Morehouse School of Medicine, John Mopin. An esteemed scientific advisory board that's co-chaired by our co-founders, Philip and Shelley, includes Tony Kouzarides at Cambridge, Leeway Sai at MIT, Eric Nestler at Mount Sinai, and John Crystal, who's head of psychiatry at Yale. And briefly, our finances. We're fortunate to have raised about $1 million in seed funding, which has allowed us to achieve the proof of concept that you've seen in the earlier slides, and a number of other preclinical milestones. And we're in the process of raising funds. We're looking to raise $15 million by the second half of this year. And this would achieve taking our lead compound, developing that, and entering into a first-in-human study. And the goal would be a significant value inflection milestone in the first-in-human study, which includes the phase 1B. And we hope to achieve a safety and efficacy readout. And this is our Gantt chart development timeline. And just to highlight, the goal is milestone 2, first-in-human study, and that's where the $15 million and about a 36-month runway would get us. And I'll leave you with why Epivario again. We're looking at large market opportunities, ones with very limited therapeutics. We're looking to help millions of lives that have really nowhere to turn to. Working with a breakthrough discovery in epigenetic gene regulation, strong founding team and expert board and SAB, and really working with leaders in the science realm across addiction and neuroscience and behavior, and some of the leading academic institutions, including Penn, Mount Sinai, and Medical University of South Carolina. And with that, thank you for your time. Look forward to questions and connecting with each of you.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Tom. Can you,
Yeah.
there we go. I think,
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. All right, great. Yeah. I was just going to say this is, a huge societal problem and, only seems to be getting worse. So, this is important stuff and thank you for pushing this forward. To start off, the first question, how did you go about selecting, targeting nicotine and alcohol versus others, say cocaine, opioids?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. We've had our initial proof of concept with cocaine, working with Chris Cowan at Medical University of South Carolina. We felt like nicotine because there is a clear regulatory path. Also, the animal model that Paul Kenny developed, he's already validated into a human trial. So I think the combination of that, along with bringing in our advisor, collaborator, Paul, and then Karen Lerman, gave us the most confidence to move that program forward. I mean, obviously, along with the data that we achieved.
Okay. Are there any differences in the mechanism of addiction with nicotine, alcohol, opioid, and does that cause any differences in the breaking that cycle?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm going to focus on is the memory-based, pitfalls that addiction patients fall into. I mean, obviously there is a chemical dependent side of things, but where we feel like we can have effects across the spectrum of addiction disorders is those who sincerely want to quit and fall prey to cue-induced relapse. And we feel like with all those subpopulations of addiction patients, we can have extreme benefit across the board.
Okay, all right, that's all the questions that we have, Tom. Thanks very much for your time today.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you.
Before we transition to our next presenter, I do just want to remind everybody that we're going to be sending out a recording of this event to everyone that registered. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you want any more information on any of these companies, or if you want to connect with the companies. And also don't forget to follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook for regular portfolio updates. And with that, I'd like to introduce the CEO of Carousel Therapeutics, Ashwin Datt.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. I'm going to share my screen and turn off my video just so that you can actually focus on the presentation and hopefully we don't have any glitches. So it's my privilege to introduce you to Carousel Therapeutics, where we are blazing the trail for adaptable, controllable, and targeted cell therapy medicines to treat cancer. We believe this platform really has the potential to be the best in class universal CAR T. As Mike said, my name is Ashwin Datt. I have over 30 years of biotech experience working at large and small biotech companies with experience in very diverse functions from research and development, manufacturing, and commercial. I've also had the experience of working in several different therapeutic areas, including immunology, ophthalmology, and oncology, and have had working experience with several modalities, including gene and cell therapy. Most recently, I was head of corporate development at Gyroscope Therapeutics, which is a gene therapy company looking to treat age-related macular degeneration. And late last year was acquired by Novartis for $1.5 billion. Dr. Mauro Castellarin is the scientific founder of Carousel Therapeutics and the co-inventor of the Sortase CAR platform, along with Dr. Carl June. Mauro has over 15 years of experience in cancer research and really generated a robust preclinical data set for this platform during his postdoc at UPenn. Dr. Bhavna Mohanraj is a board member of Carousel in her capacity at PCIV and has been supporting operations and business development activities. Together, we have the skills and experience to really recognize the issues of conventional cell therapy approaches, and are really excited for Carousel Therapeutics to really provide a best-in-class solution for cancer patients. And the cell therapy market is really expected to grow at a 25% CAGR over the next decade, with a significant amount of that growth really happening in oncology. This really represents a tremendous opportunity for patients as well as for shareholders. But it is important to remember that this is still a very nascent class of therapies, with the first really commercially approved CAR T, Novartis's Kymriah, just in 2017. Despite this very recent commercial entry to the market, CAR T therapy is already revolutionizing cancer treatment. Dr. June and his colleagues just published in Nature a 10-year journey of the first patients dosed with experimental CAR Ts. And he's quoted as saying, "We can now conclude that CAR T cells can actually cure patients." Just last year, Kite Pharma, a wholly owned subsidiary of Gilead, recently released ZUMA-7 and ZUMA-12 data, really showing against standard of care that CAR Ts can move from a palliative setting towards being curative. Despite this transformative success, there really are some very real limitations for conventional CAR therapies. Conventional CAR Ts are designed to recognize specific antigens, and we know that some aggressive cancers have multiple antigens, which would require multiple CAR Ts, and that as a cancer evolves and adapts to treatment, antigens change. And as a result, a CAR T may no longer be effective against the specific antigen it's been developed for. Part of being robust in its effectiveness also has some of the key side effect issues with conventional CARs, including immune overreaction and, more importantly, on-target, off-tumor toxicity. By understanding both the potential of the curative benefit and the specific limitations of conventional CARs, Morrow and Carl really took an engineering approach to enhance the benefits of CAR Ts while engineering out some of the liabilities and limitations, thereby developing this universal CAR platform that is adaptable and controllable. At the heart of this mechanism is sortase, and sortase is a unique biologically active lock and key mechanism. And the reason that Morrow really chose sortase is because it's been extensively studied and optimized in a variety of different uses, from drug conjugation to biopolymer manufacturing for tissue engineering. And really one of the biggest advantages that this provides, that I think gives us our sort of unique advantage and unique value proposition, is that sortases form reversible covalent bonds with their substrate. This enables a really stable interaction between the receptor and the adapter. It also enables for a modularity of adapters, so we can bring in different adapters for the different antigens. We can have simultaneous dosing, or we can have sequential dosing of the adapters. And really, this very highly specific and strong enzyme substrate interaction creates what we call a preferential pair, and that activates the CAR T. And really, in the next two slides, what we'll demonstrate is both the power and the promise of this platform to be able to not only have different adapters, but also make sure that the CAR T is active and inactive as appropriate. As I mentioned earlier, Morrow has generated a robust preclinical data set, and this includes extensive in vitro assays to really optimize the sortase CAR platform. In addition to the in vitro work, over 100 in vivo studies where we've really worked to demonstrate the efficacy of the model. And while doing that, really have had no observable safety issues in these in vivo studies. The experiment that is shown here really demonstrates the power of this platform. And essentially what happens here is that a mouse is challenged with tumor A, and then we have a single dose of the universal CAR T that's injected, followed by infusion of the adapter to target tumor A, and then the tumor is cleared. The mouse is allowed to rest and then challenged with a different tumor type, tumor B, and then those initial CAR Ts that were infused at the beginning of this experiment are now reactivated by using adapter B that's been infused, and now this recurrent tumor is cleared. And so in this experiment, not only is that primary tumor cleared and it doesn't relapse, but a second tumor that's evolved with a different antigen is now also cleared. And again, really the power of this is this initial single CAR T that's been infused, and it can be reactivated. And at the end of this experiment, and again, really important, no observable safety issues, with really demonstrating this incredibly powerful efficacy. So how could that potentially translate into the clinic, and what could that really mean? And this is the promise. The promise for patients receiving sortase CAR T could look something like this. A woman is biopsied for relapsed ovarian cancer tumor types, then dosed with a universal CAR, and then repeated injections of this adapter as needed to maintain not only the activity, but also to clear the tumor. And once that tumor is cleared, there is continuing review of the patient, and should there be a recurrence, now a second adapter can be infused with no additional CAR Ts being required, and really re-injecting with the new adapter as necessary to clear the tumor. And really what we believe this will then drive is durable remission in this severely unmet need. As a whole, this platform can be very flexible and efficacious, and there's really no need for any additional apheresis, immunodepletion, or time lag, as the patient really no longer needs to wait for a treatment as the cancer evolves or adapts. And this could, I've shown you this sequentially, but this is an example of where we could also have dual target dosing if we realize that there's two different targets that are driving this particular tumor. So where are we now? We're looking to close a 20 million Series A by the end of March. The proceeds will be used to finalize the technology agreement with UPenn and start to build the team necessary to actually start executing in some additional experiments that we would need to do. We are already engaged in discussions with contract manufacturers to really think about what the process development and commercial manufacturing would need to look for the universal CAR. And we want to get that up and running so that we can start doing the PD work. We have a planned meeting with the FDA at the end of this year, and have already begun discussions with several regulatory experts to really understand what we would need to do. And again, given the body of work that's been generated so far, really what we're driving to is to make sure that we can have this conversation, understand then what additional studies we would need to do. And that's what we'd really spend between the manufacturing process and these IND enabling studies, the proceeds, so that we are ready potentially to initiate a phase 1 study in Q1 of 2024. So as I mentioned, this platform came out of Carl June's lab. Dr. Mauro Castorelin is really the one who's developed this core technology. We believe it's best in class, adaptable and controllable. We have a robust body of preclinical data to be able to show both the safety and the efficacy, as well as the robustness of the CAR T, strong IP position with freedom to operate. And then the 20 million Series A will be really used to build the team and to execute on the path to get into the clinic in the next 24 months. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashwin. Can you talk a little bit about how the sortase adapters differ from Arcellx's ARC-SparX platform? And you can extrapolate that to some of the other competitors as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. So Arcellx is actually a great example of, in this tough market, having clinical data, making a real difference and being able to continue to build a company. Their lead programs are all conventional CARs, and really their platform has more of a non-covalent bonding backbone. So I think this difference between covalent bonding and non-covalent bonding is really important. It'll be interesting to see, honestly, how, as they publish additional data and look at going into the clinic with their universal CAR, what that's going to be. But our big differentiator, and really our big differentiator amongst other universal CARs that are out there, is the use of sortase. And sortase in particular, there aren't a lot of these substrate enzyme cores that are available that are highly biologically functional, but also can be engineered to have very limited human endogenous off-target effects as well. So it's a very finite number of things that you can go after and do, and that's really what's our core differentiator.
Okay. How long can this universal CAR T survive in patients? Have you done any of the studies? I assume maybe you've done it in mice, but not humans. Yeah,
so not in humans, and that's really part of what the proceeds will be used to do, is to really start to demonstrate this efficacy. If you take the data that we have in our in vivo studies and extrapolate that to current CARs that have conventional CARs, we should see no difference in the durability and accessibility of these CARs for a fairly long period of time. But that's still a TBD to do, right? But the in vivo studies have really demonstrated activation, reactivation, and durability that's comparable to what we've seen with conventional CARs in the in vivo models as well.
Okay. And so I'm pretty sure this is an autologous CAR T, but is there any possibility to develop an allogeneic component to this?
Yeah, it's a great question. In the first instance, we definitely want to go autologous to make sure that we are controlling and demonstrating proof of utility and proof of concept. But the platform is highly amenable to allogeneic platform. And honestly, with the money that we would bring in, potentially what we would look at is to collaborate and work with in vivo cell therapy technologies, and potentially actually leapfrogging allogeneic altogether and looking at potentially going into in vivo cell therapy development, given the opportunity that exists with that.
Okay. And so here's a good question. What is the tumor antigen targeted for the lead program? And if you want to expand on other programs that you're interested in, please go ahead.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And currently there are two parallel approaches that we're looking at. And this has really been influenced significantly by Dr. June and Dr. Nathan Singh, who's an advisor for Carousel. So we're looking at AML for proof of utility. I know it's a really crowded space, but it's a disease with a huge unmet need, and both from a cost and burden to the patient and to the physician and payer system, there's a really valuable opportunity to look at CD33, CD123, and potentially other expressions. And then in the unmet ovarian, the relapsed ovarian cancer, we have already started to identify a set of potential targets, antigen targets, EGFR, HER1, mesothelin, and we will build that library out in that first 6 months, as I mentioned, with the proceeds that we have, so that we can actually effectively profile some of these relapsed ovarian cancer cell lines. And that's what we will start to, and that is really the key to the FDA interaction, is taking these two disease models and thinking about what the clinical program would look like. But those are some of the initial thoughts that we have and data that we have in terms of our in vivo models.
Thanks, Ashwin. Appreciate your time today. And that's all the questions. We're going to move on to our final company for the day. I'd like to introduce Dan Rizzuto, CEO of Neo-Therapeutics.
Thanks, Michael. Good to be here. Excited to share the latest updates from Neo-Therapeutics. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so Neo-Therapeutics is developing a precision neurostimulation therapy for the treatment of memory loss. This is technology that I developed at the University of Pennsylvania, along with my scientific co-founder, with about $24 million in funding from DARPA to the University of Pennsylvania, which allowed us to clinically test and evaluate various strategies for improving memory function in human neurosurgical patients. So we've built, NIA has been operational since 2018, when DARPA allowed us to carve out some of that initial 24 million as a pre-seed round. And over that time, we've built a great team. Myself, co-inventor of NIA's technology, and Mike Kahana, who also co-inventor of the technology and an award-winning professor of human memory at Penn. Daniil Uton is our chief technology officer, who has extensive experience in enterprise software and cryptography. And we've got a stellar advisory board, including neurosurgical, neurological, and engineering expertise. So what is the problem that we're targeting here? It's memory loss. And over 27 million Americans are currently suffering from memory loss. That's 1 in 12 Americans. And this can be caused by a variety of indications, from traumatic brain injury. Most people don't know, but memory loss is actually the leading symptom of somebody who has had a traumatic brain injury. But it's also caused by mild cognitive impairment, which is sometimes seen as a prodromal or early form of Alzheimer's disease. Then there's full-blown Alzheimer's disease, and even age-related memory loss. So these are huge unmet needs in society. The symptoms are devastating to patients and their families. These patients forget appointments and events. They have trouble with their finances, cooking and driving, and therefore have trouble being independent. They withdraw from social activities because of embarrassment about their condition, and they end up unemployed in severe cases. And there are no effective treatments available to these patients. Yeah, there's a few pharmaceuticals available for Alzheimer's disease, but if we're being honest, they don't actually work. So new modalities are needed. Neo-Therapeutics is developing the smart neurostimulation system, which is personalized medicine for the treatment of memory disorders. It includes both implantable and wearable components. It's based on deep brain stimulation technology for the treatment of Parkinson's disease. It has secure cloud connectivity, and it's connected to a cloud-based AI, artificial intelligence platform that personalizes the therapy to each patient's unique patterns of brain activity. And our AI platform allows these therapies to improve over time through network effects. So NIA's technology was developed at the University of Pennsylvania with 24 million in funding from DARPA. I feel like I said that already. And our AI algorithms predict memory lapses based on each patient's brain activity. This technology is based on over 20 years of research into the human neurological correlates of memory, going back to my graduate work with Mike Kahana, who's now my co-founder at NIA. And we've successfully used those algorithms not only to predict when a patient's memory will fail, but we use neurostimulation to change the state of the brain. And we have extensive clinical data published in multiple high-impact publications. Using a clinical prototype, we've demonstrated significant memory improvement in neurosurgical patients who are undergoing neurological monitoring with implanted electrodes. So this image here, figure on the right, shows the change in recall performance. That is, patients' ability to recall word lists with personalized stimulation of lateral temporal cortex during the performance of these tasks. And you can see there's pretty wide variability across patients, from a modest or minor impairment in patient 4 all the way up to a 40% improvement in patient number 2, with an average of about 20% change in recall. And we believe that the stimulation targeting, the surgical placement of the electrode, is what is driving the majority of this variance. So we believe we can further improve efficacy through improved stimulation targeting in our first clinical trial. So what does a 20% improvement in verbal memory actually mean? Well, it can mean the difference between somebody who is disabled and not disabled, between somebody who returns to work after their injury and somebody who does not return to work after their injury. In patients with TBI, the research clearly shows that recovery of verbal memory, the normal recovery that happens after a traumatic brain injury, it predicts the ability to return to work. If a patient is lucky enough to return to work, it predicts how well they perform at work, and it predicts long-term reductions in disability. So we haven't yet shown these functional implications of memory improvement. We've just shown acute changes in memory improvement, but we believe this is what's possible with NIA's therapy when we drive towards our first clinical trial. So we've developed the functional prototypes of our commercial platform over the past 3 years. As I mentioned, it includes both a wearable earpiece and implant and the programmer cloud capabilities. We're in the process of revising these devices this year as we lead up to manufacturing and our first preclinical studies. So we expect to initiate preclinical studies, safety studies, this year in a large animal model, and to ramp up manufacturing, and then to initiate our first clinical trial in patients with memory loss due to traumatic brain injury next year. We're currently raising an $8 million round to do this manufacturing and preclinical testing activities. We're about halfway through raising that round. And we've reviewed our clinical plans with the FDA in 3 separate, very productive meetings. So we have been doing good de-risking of our regulatory path with the FDA. The TAM for the memory loss market is huge. It's over $100 billion. We think we can target over 3 million patients across traumatic brain injury, mild cognitive impairment, and early Alzheimer's disease. At an average sales price of $30,000 per system, that produces a total accessible market of over $100 billion across the 3 indications. And we believe that we can ramp to an 8% penetration in each market over a 10-year period post-commercialization. Existing devices provide favorable reimbursement precedent. As I mentioned, there's existing devices for Parkinson's and also for epilepsy, implantable neurostimulators that utilize existing approved DRG codes with payments from $25K to $35K. We will need to seek coverage from Medicare and private payers, but the coding is already in place. We also expect to seek coverage from the VA and, in fact, to work closely with the VA during clinical development, because TBI, which is our first indication, is something of importance to the VA and the military. We're riding a technological and market adoption wave here. Implantable neurostimulators are increasingly used for other indications, from Parkinson's, epilepsy, blindness. Retinal stimulators, we're actually curing blindness, and deafness. We're curing people who were formerly deaf. The global neurostimulation market is $5.7 billion and growing at a 15% compound annual growth rate. So yeah, we believe that these other indications have de-risked the path to market. And finally, the NIA smart neurostimulation system can be the pacemaker for the brain. There's nearly 100 million Americans who suffer from nervous system disorders, with an annual cost to society of over $760 billion, according to the NIH. Memory loss is just the start. There are multiple other neurological indications that are tractable using closed-loop, personalized neurostimulation, and NIA can be the pacemaker for the brain. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan. Are there ongoing costs that you would incur for maintenance of this device over time? You talked about charging $30,000. Is there, have you thought, do you need to charge a monthly fee as well?
There are additional revenue possibilities for the company because we have a earpiece that has a rechargeable battery that is expected to be replaced about every 3 years. So that will provide an additional revenue stream that hasn't been taken into account in our current TAM calculations. So that's one possible recurring revenue streams. There are people that are looking at, unique business models around neurostimulation, like the per dose or the per month treatment model. We haven't really modeled that out yet, but yeah, there are people experimenting with those types of models as well.
Do you have a sense of how long the internal device will last for before it breaks down or infection occurs?
Yeah, so, well, the infection risk profile is very well understood from prior neurostimulator systems that are implanted. There's about a 1% risk of infection from this procedure, which has come down over time, is expected to continue to go down as surgical techniques improve. And what was the other part of your question?
Will it break down?
Yeah, the time course. Yeah, so we are expecting at least a 10-year life for these devices, and that's just the warranty period. These devices are intended for chronic implantation, and there are patients with I will say they're much better than the epilepsy NeuroPace devices, which have an implantable battery in the cranium, and those need to be replaced on a 3 to 5 year basis because of that battery issue. Because we've placed the battery outside of the body in that replaceable earpiece, we don't have the same battery life issues. So these devices are expected to last much longer, at least 10 years, probably 15 to 20.
Okay, and we'll get you out of here with just one more question. Ideally, when do you want to treat these patients? When do you want to find them, and at what stage do you want to treat them?
So in our first patient population, which is memory loss due to traumatic brain injury, we want to wait at least 1 year post-injury, because there's a normal recovery process that happens after injury. But if you haven't regained your memory after that 1 year period, you're not going to. That's the period to intervene in patients with traumatic memory loss, traumatic brain injury. In the case of mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's, you really want to intervene as early as possible. So as soon as you get that diagnosis.
Okay. All right, great. Thanks, Dan. Really appreciate you taking the time to tell us about your company today. With that, I'd also like to thank all the companies that presented and everyone that that participated. We are going to record this and we'll be sending it out to you. So please let us know if you want to speak with any companies. You know, we're looking forward to keeping in touch with you, and please take advantage of all of our other virtual pitch events coming up in the future.